Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Marche, the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. And before we introduce our guests and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. Well, we are thrilled that you are here today for this very important and probably timely topic. If you are here as a parent or a loved one of someone who needs some financial literacy for teens, young adults, or honestly anyone, this is a good start. Attendees are muted, but we encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and our presenter will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. And she has also said it is totally fine to ask a question during her presentation, and as conversational as possible is awesome. If you have a question and you don't have a chance to have it answered, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. We will make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. Well, once again, please don't hesitate to ask for clarification. Well, I'd love to introduce you to today's guests. Our moderator today is Eric Boehm, a partner and co-founder of Stonebridge Asset Management. He brings international and institutional investment perspectives to his team, having begun his financial career in the Czech Republic, working for both a local bank and an emerging equity fund. Eric holds degrees from New York University's Stern School of Business, Johns Hopkins SAIS, and Georgetown University. He obtained the Chartered Financial Analyst designation in 2002 and the Certified Kingdom Advisor designation in 2007. He and his wife have 2 children and reside in Signal Mountain, Tennessee. On his off hours, he can be found spending time with his family, playing soccer, pursuing spiritual growth, and leading mission trips to the Czech Republic. Eric, I know that you're kind of behind the scenes on the video, so why don't you go ahead and say hello so people can see your face.
Hello? That's right. I need to talk for you guys to there we go.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it. Well, our presenter today is Stephanie Martin. She's the president of College Living Experience and has spent her career working with students with varying disabilities of all ages. As an educator, first and foremost, Stephanie brings her unique perspective and unwavering passion of supporting the special education community through innovative services of CLE. Stephanie focuses on co-creating an environment where students have maximized opportunity to be their own self-determined advocates with the necessary skills to be successful. And Stephanie, we're so excited to have you back. I think this is applicable to anyone. I know your expertise is in working with students with diverse needs, but this is education that is applicable to any teen or young adult. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and turn the time over to you.
Okay. Thanks for having me again. I'm excited about this. As Marche said, that this is timely, I think, for anybody, whether you have a neurotypical in a child in your household or somebody who's neurodiverse. I think money management is incredibly important. And from my perspective, as the president of CLE, we have wraparound supports, and which include everything from education and independent living skills. But it's really interesting that the one support that tends to stay with our students throughout their entirety with us at College Living Experience is the financial literacy and support that we provide in terms of instruction, monitoring, and helping the students manage their own money and their own budgets. So that's part of the reason why I came to this particular webinar, because of the experience that we have and how difficult it truly is to make that connection between what is money, how you earn it, and how do you safely spend it in such a way that you are not going to, that you're going to be independent with it as you age into your adulthood. So today, during our the goal for the webinar outcomes are this: what the expectations are for the parent, the child, or the student, how we're going to set the stage for success, an overview of scope and sequence of skills. Now, please know that this is a very small set of skills. Financial management is really a very big topic, and I'm sure Eric can attest to that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, I just added a couple simple resources on the very last page. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So expectations, when we drill down into financial literacy, which sounds super, fancy, it's really just money management. And what does that mean? I mean, money management broadly refers to the process. The process is utilized to record and administer an individual, a household, or an organization's finances. What I think is really interesting for us as individuals, whether we're educators or parents, is that oftentimes when we talk about money management, we think that the topic is taboo with our children. And so we don't start discussing it. And at an early age, we keep putting it off. We want to talk about things that we believe are more important in terms of topics besides money management. But it's really interesting. I found it's a little bit of an old survey, but there's a survey put out by T. Rowe Price. It's a family, parent, and kids money survey. And from that survey, it says that 41% surveyed say they sometimes avoid talking to their kids about money at all. 72% experience reluctance in having any conversation with their kids about financial matters. Now, okay, the 72% is a pretty high percentage. So why? Why are parents reluctant to have a conversation with them? And many often say that they believe that their children are too young to understand, and they'd rather discuss other important topics. However, of those people surveyed, 69% of the parents are very or extremely concerned with setting good financial examples for kids. And if you want your kid to be a financially reasonable adult, responsible adult, they have to start young. So the expectations here for the parents is you start young, and your expectation as a parent for your kid is that they start young. So something to consider there. So that's what we know, but what can we do? Again, money, there's a service out there that basically says money habits are formed as early as age 7. And many of us might not think that that's a reasonable age, but it is a reasonable age. And you want them to start to develop those habits at that early age, so that by the time they become in a position to manage their own money, they'll have the experience and they'll have the knowledge to do so. We often dismiss our children in the middle of a money decision, whether it's paying the bill at the restaurant or handing over money at the grocery store, things like that. Make sure that you're beginning to share exactly what's happening. How much do these 3 meals cost? How long did I have to work in order to make the money to pay for these 3 meals? Those are the kinds of conversations to start to have overtly and consciously with your children as they age up into adulthood. Start simple. You really want to start simple with teaching them. I know this sounds really basic, but it's just a reminder. Teach them the names and the values of coins and paper money, what that looks like. The other part is understanding that money is not free and that it comes in limited quantities. So where we stand with today's world of everything being so virtual, a lot of our children grow up thinking that money is kind of magical, right? That they have a debit card or they have a credit card, and there's no direct connection between what this card does and where the money started from, how it was earned, and where it's kept, right? So if you're a concrete thinker and you've got a card in your hand, are you actually thinking that somehow that money is embedded in the card and that it's not actually attributed to a bank account or anything like that? So really begin early and teaching them how it all ties together. So a couple of things to think about as we move forward. The easiest thing that you can do for the youngest children possible, start with 3 jars, 3 containers, whatever it is, and put a label on each one. One says save, one says spend, and one says donate. So at every time that your child gets money, whether it's through an allowance, they're given some money at a holiday or from a family member, they then, sorry about the cat, I'm trying my hardest, everybody. I'm really trying.
We've been hearing a little bit of cat action there.
Every time they get money, the goal is for them to dedicate which jar they're going to put that money in. As a parent, you can dictate, do they do it equally? Do they get to actually have free will in terms of where it goes? But this is a great way to start the concept of saving, and not to spend everything that you have right away. Okay, so there's some things to consider. Kids are really observant. So if you're taking them into the grocery store, you might want to take the opportunity to look at 2 different products. They're same exact products that might have a different price point. Why would you buy one that has a lower price point, or why would you buy one that has a higher price point? Bring them into the fold to start to understand what drives those decisions. Okay. Let your children participate in money moments. What is a money moment? When you hand over money, when you buy that cup of coffee, have your child hand over those dollar bills and have them receive the change that comes back. Don't let them pocket that change, but sit down with them and have them count out that change to make sure that you've got everything you were supposed to get in return, and that they understand what the value of those coins are. How much does it actually take to buy a cup of coffee? Make it fun. How do you make it fun? If they've got something that's really interesting to them, take them with you so that they can start to see what it costs when you go to a store. If they want something of their very own and they don't necessarily have the money for it, do you give them a loan, and say, I'll buy this for you, but you'll have to pay me back. So, and you're going to pay me back through your allowance. Right. So then now we're talking a little bit about borrowing, right? This is all on very simple terms. But if you start at as early as 6 or 7, then by the time they're 10, 12, 14 years old, all of this just becomes a little bit like muscle memory. And it's not something that's so foreign.
Hey, Stephanie, can
Yeah.
I ask a question here? Someone has
Sure.
asked if you've noticed whether using cash and physical money is better for teaching kids than using a checkbook or a credit card, and if there's like an age point that's more appropriate for starting to use something like a debit card or a checkbook.
We tend to start with cash regardless of age. And so we start with cash because it's something that they can hold in their hand. And one way that you can start is that you actually budget out how much cash they have per week. And so let's just use a round number of $40. Okay, so they have $40 in their wallet or their purse or whatever it is. And when that $40 is gone, they're done. There's no debit card, there's no credit card, there's no backup, right? So you know exactly what you have to spend because you've got your hot little hands wrapped around it. As long as a student can actually manage their weekly or monthly basis based on a cash basis and only utilizing cash, then we will recommend that a student go to a debit card. The debit card acts, obviously, as you all know, as cash, but it if there's more money in that account than just the $40, then the student runs the risk of spending more than what they have. So that's part of the reason why, and we'll get to the budgeting slides, but that's the reason why you look and you monitor one's budget and account on a weekly basis so that they have a running idea of what's available and what's not available. So I don't think going from a cash to a debit card is strictly dependent upon an age. It's really more dependent upon the understanding of how to monitor and manage their money. Good question. All right, let's keep going. So setting the stage for success. I think we already talked a little bit about this, but start early. As early as you can. You want to talk about what is money. You want to talk about how to earn money and where and when to spend money. Okay. So we all know that starting early is the best way to do it. And talk about what money is, right? So it is something that you have to earn. How do you earn it? You get a job. What does that mean? And how many hours a day do you work in order to take home what you have? And then really clearly outline for folks where and when to spend money. Is this a need or is this a want? In today's world, a lot of our children are really faced with some decisions that don't make a lot of sense. So how many of you all have kids out there that play video games online that have in-app purchases, right? And if you're not careful about it, they can keep clicking on that little in-app purchase. And before you know it, you're $500 in the hole. They don't, because there's not a direct link to that. They don't understand that this money is coming from someplace. It's obviously, it might not be coming from them, because if it was, they wouldn't be making that click. But really understanding there's so much more that our children and our world is faced with today than it was, say, 10, 20 years ago. So even knowing what challenges or obstacles our students face today, we have to address it overtly. We have to be conscientious of it. We have to teach it in real time and model for them what that looks like. So if you have something that you really, really want and you are putting money aside for it, talk about the fact that you're putting money aside for it and how long you think it's going to take for you to actually put enough money aside to buy whatever that item is, right? So making sure that you're modeling for your children or for your students exactly what proper money management looks like.
Yeah, I've got a comment here. This question of what is money really is an interesting question, and we at Stonebridge often get into start conversations with some of our new clients on excuse me, with that question, what is money? And it seems kind of a silly question, maybe abstract, but it's useful in getting a sense of how people have formed, incorrect concepts about money. And this is not a client who said this, but in having a conversation like this with a friend of mine, he was telling me about how a child that he ended up adopting confronted him at one point and said, let's get something straight here. You tell me that you love me, but I don't think you love me, because at my other home, and so in this case, the child's parent died, but it was like my dad told me he loved me, and he gave me his credit card, and I could go out and spend money, and that's how I knew he loved me. Now I'm in your home, and you tell me no, I can't buy something, but you tell me you love me. So obviously there's a disconnect here. You must not really love me. So it's an interesting example, but I think it's real because a lot of people kind of have that sense of, money is not just the money I have in my checkbook, but money represents something, and it either represents, someone loves me because I can spend this money, or, this is how I love myself by spending this money on something that I want. So it really, it is a deeper issue than just saying, well, money's a currency that I use, to buy something. The connection emotionally to money is can reflect something unhealthy about their
Absolutely.
ability to budget over in their lifetimes.
That's a really good point, and it's a good example of how complicated money is and how complicated money management is.
Mhm.
And understanding that even if it's not your money, there's needs to be some sound decision making in terms of how it's being spent. So I think that's a great example. So just a scope and sequence of skills. We're not going to go through each of these in detail, but we'll touch on some of them. If you have questions, please ask. This is a very, very narrow scope and sequence of skills. It can get very intricate and far more complicated depending on an individual's knowledge and where they want to land in terms of managing their money. I'm sure Eric can speak to that more than I can, but starting with making money. I mean, you can't spend anything if you don't have it. So making money, budgeting money, living on your own, banking, understanding credit, and then saving and investing. So that's the scope and sequence of skills.
Can I ask a question here too,
Sure.
Stephanie? There's actually someone else who had asked, when you're talking about budgeting money, the question is, would it be appropriate to show your teen or young adult your household budget? Is that something that you would recommend?
I don't see why not. I mean, I'm trying to think back about the pros and the cons of that. It depends on obviously the relationship that you have with your child, but if you're trying to teach them what it takes to run a household, whether it's because you're renting your home or your apartment, or you own your own home, that the costs associated with that and a family are exorbitant. I think that, most teens don't consider all that it takes. And we'll go over that a little bit on living on your own. Just even the cost of setting up your first apartment. I mean, nobody really talks about how much that's going to cost, right? And how much are we as parents, do we cover the cost of some of those associated expenses? Because we want obviously we want our children to successfully launch, and they're not necessarily going to be able to do that with some level of support, but they will be better suited to maintain that level of independence if they truly understand how to manage what money they do make. So I would.
Good, thank you.
Sure. So pretty simply, making money means that you're employed or that you're earning money in some capacity. Okay. Securing a job that suits your skills and abilities results in financial independence. It's not only a necessary fact of life, but it's also a source of personal satisfaction. So having a job aims to empower anybody to use available resources and preparatory strategies to successfully land a job that matches their skills or abilities. What does this really mean? If we're talking about teaching money management and your kid's 7, they're not going to have a job. Not one that's outside of the house. So what can you do? Start with an allowance. Start teaching them that there are specific responsibilities or tasks that are assigned to them specifically, not necessarily to the household, but to they own it. And when they do it, they can earn money for it. That helps them understand the link or the connection between effort and earnings. So start with an allowance. Provide basic information about how employment and money are tied together, that some employers pay you every week, some employers pay you twice a month or once a month, and that then changes how you budget, right? So if you only get paid once a month, then you're going to really have to be pretty savvy on how when you're going to be able to spend money throughout that month. So start making that connection and that link between them. The other aspect of being employed is when your child gets to the point where they can have a job outside of the house, talk to them about all of the hidden costs that go along with being employed. And you're like, what? Think about all of the transportation costs. So if your child drives, how much does it take to get to and from work? If they don't drive, how much does it cost for you to take them to and from work, or Uber, or ride their bike, or take the bus? So transportation is a huge hidden cost as it relates to employment. If they have any kind of expectation or requirement for a uniform, is that something that the employer provides, or do they have to buy it? Does the employer provide food more often than not? No. So are they going to bring their lunch, or are they going to buy their lunch? And we know the difference between the cost between the two. If you bring your lunch, you're saving a whole lot more money than if you're eating out every day. So talk about those kinds of costs that are tied to being employed, and making sure you're setting your child or your student up for success, that you've had this conversation with them and that you've outlined all of those expenses that go along with it.
Yeah, there's a question here about, what are your thoughts on students working while they're going to school, whether high school or college? I'll say from my experience, both of my kids worked during high school, part-time jobs, and they were able to manage that with their high school. So I would say it probably depends on their ability to manage the school and the work. When my son transitioned to college, his ability to maintain that job, and a new job now at his new environment, it started to interfere with school. So we're actually talking now about not working next semester, so that he can actually focus more on school. In that case, I can see there's a difference between high school and college, and there can also be a difference between kids as well. But Stephanie, what do you think about that?
I think that you're right. It depends on the individual. It depends on their circumstances. If they're a high school student who's taking, college credit courses, they have 5 or 6 extracurricular activities, and there's very little time for a job, then I guess that's a question of how do you reallocate the resources or that time, that the student has. I would, from my perspective, I worked all through high school and all through college, but it gave me a much better understanding of what I was capable of doing in terms of what I could afford and where my family helped, or was they stated that they would help. And so if, as an adult, as a parent, if you go in and saying, I'm going to cover this expense and this, I'm going to cover your cell phone, your car insurance, and your rent in college and college or whatever, then, but anything else is your responsibility. You're teaching a lot. It's not just about money, but it's about responsibility, and it's about owning the decisions that go along with this. And so it's not a hard and fast answer to that question of whether a student should work in high school or college. It's really going to be dependent upon all of the other variables that make it viable or not. My personal opinion is that being employed by someone outside of your family is a huge reality check, because you are having to follow the guidelines, the rules, the expectations of somebody else in order to get that money that you so desperately want. And so it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot about how to mature, how to receive feedback, how to thrive within an environment that's outside of your household. So that was a long-winded answer.
Thank you.
So if you haven't, start building a budget. Even if your child's 12, instead of putting in their monthly salary from a job, you're going to put in their monthly allowance. And they're going to say, but I don't have any expenses. Well, then as a parent, what would you do? Have them pay you something, even if it's a nominal dollar, right? If they get an allowance, $20 a month, I don't know what allowances are anymore. But to teach them to budget, they have to have an expense. They have to see this much is coming in and this much is going out to understand how to start to manage that. And then you can see in this particular example that there's monthly income, there's monthly expenses, and there's also monthly savings. So if you do provide your child with an allowance, set the expectation that X percentage of that dollar amount gets put into a savings account and is not available for use except for under emergencies, something like that. So really start to look at, there's so many templates out there. This template is just a word. It's just a Microsoft 365 template. Anybody can use it. So obviously when you build a budget, you look at all of the sources of income. If you have grandparents who give your kids, $50 every Christmas or every Hanukkah, whatever it is, list that out so they can start to see, oh, I have that much money, right? And then they can figure out if they want to save for a rainy day or they want to save for something special that they're looking for. List all of the expenses. And for the question that goes back to, should I show my kid the household budget? This is a great way to do that. Show them exactly all of the expenses that go along with it. As you're building a budget, you want to talk about defining the difference between a want and a need. And a want is something that you can survive just fine without. A need is something that is you absolutely need it in order to continue to be independent and thrive. And then recommendation is either track on a daily or a weekly basis to start, and then project that out to a monthly basis. But starting daily or weekly is a great place to begin. Any questions on building a budget? I think the other thing to remember is that money is a limited resource, and that it doesn't grow on trees, and it doesn't magically appear. So this is the one way that you can start to teach individuals that it's not magical in nature. Here are all the reasons, if you're not convinced yet, of why you should build a budget. It puts you in control. It gives you a great idea of what you're spending from a visual perspective. You have a clear understanding of how much money you have to spend. It helps you decide what to spend your money on. It helps prevent impulse spending. It helps you decide what you can and cannot afford, how to track your money, how to create a savings plan, and it helps you stay out of financial trouble. So I thought I'd tell you a little story of a student. And how difficult budgeting can be for some individuals. And so we support our students in building a budget, and we have some students who just bust that budget every single month. And which is difficult, because then the families have to come in, or the student says, I have no food, which is not necessarily the case. But what we did is we decided to make this a more realistic consequence for this individual by not adhering to their budget. And the idea was that if they couldn't stay within their budget on a monthly basis, that they would then have to go home. And going home was a 10-hour bus ride. And they would have to stay with their family for a couple days, and then they'd have to take the 10-hour bus ride back to the location in which they were going to school. That was a really arduous process for that individual. And she has stayed subsequently. It happened once. She has stayed within her budget since. And so it helped for her to make it real and a reality, that there are consequences, that if you can't stay within your budget, there are some real serious consequences. So that was a good example. Okay. Now we talked a little bit about moving out and living on your own, and as it related to the questions about, do I show my household budget? Living on your own is a reality check for so many individuals, and it's important to examine the cost of moving, setting up, and maintaining a household. I think most of these things you think about, like rent and furniture and housewares, the cost of the move, cable and internet, the how much the deposit is, what are the utilities. I don't even think I'm scratching the surface of all the things. I didn't put in there groceries. I didn't put in, all of those kinds of things. And so the upfront cost of moving out and living on your own are pretty high. So when you're at a point with your child of getting them set up, they need to play a pretty significant role in this. So what they've been saving, maybe it doesn't go to that new computer. Maybe it goes to putting down and addressing some of these expenses in living on their own, so that they have a stake in the game. Questions about this particular slide? Okay.
I'll just say, I think that's a really useful and an effective thing to do to talk about this cost of living on your own, and especially as you're approaching college and have kids, wanting to wanting to or moving off to college, to just think about that, and especially when they, I guess, move off of on-campus housing to the point of where they're going to want to rent a place, and then all of a sudden, all they think about is the monthly rent. That's it.
And that's it.
And so to have something like this, say, oh, it's much more than that. There's a lot more going on than just your rent.
Yeah, I mean, I remember moving out. Does everybody remember, like, what am I going to hang my clothes on? Oh, I don't have any hangers. I have to go buy. Oh, man. All right, I'm not going to buy hangers. I'll just fold everything. I don't have a dresser drawer. I don't have anywhere to put it. So I'll use milk crate. So, all of those kinds of things, there's just a trickle effect that just kind of snowballs as it goes forward. So outlining and considering these things is going to be important as you move forward. When we talk about living on your own, more from the specifics of renting or leasing, you have to really clearly define these variables. How long is the rent for, or the lease for? Is it for 12 months? Is it for 18 months? What happens if you decide that you want to move out? Do you have to pay a penalty? How much is it? What is the due date for it? Is there a penalty if they miss the due date? Do they know the address and the name of the people who they're renting from? It sounds silly, but it's a really good one. Do they know what to do and how to communicate with the property management or the landlord if something breaks? Because if they don't, and they can't put in a maintenance request, then it's on them to call somebody to come and fix it and pay for it. So then the cost goes up. So just a couple other things to think about in terms of the cost of living on your own. Banking. I think this is the most nebulous, the most sort of vague thing, and for students and children today. So we obviously know there's checking accounts and there's savings accounts with interest, and there's electronic deposit and withdrawals, cashless transactions, bank charges. Start early by having them set up a savings account, having them set up a checking account so that they have to monitor it, whether using, online tools to help them track what they're doing, or you're doing it the old-fashioned way with a ledger. It's all really up to you, but make sure that they understand the difference between a checking account and a savings account. When they're really little, if you're still going to the bank, which is a weird thing for me to say, if you're still actually going into the bank, take your kids with you so that they can watch the interaction and the transactions that take place, and they can start to hear the language that's used around money. If you're using online deposits, where you take a picture of it with your phone, model that so that they understand what's happening, so that they and talk about how this picture is transmitted and who picks it up, how it's accounted for, how it gets up into your account, Do all of those things so that they understand. They might not understand how the money gets there, but they're understanding that this is what you're doing in order to deposit money into your account. I think one thing I haven't listed on here, and I'm not even certain I know how to wrap my head around all of it, but there are so many different ways to pay for things now, whether it's Apple Pay, it's PayPal, it's Venmo, there's one on my phone, I don't even remember the name of it. Those are going to be the way of the future. And so understanding how PayPal is attached to your bank account, or Venmo is attached to your bank account, and what bank account is it attached to? How does that money come in? If you have a professional account, do you know that you actually pay a percentage for every transaction? All of those kinds of things really start to change how we teach and monitor our money. But if we're not certain we know what we're talking about, first learn that and then share that information with your child. Again, when they're younger, if you're doing that money interaction, make them count their own money so that they go, oh, you know what, here's you bought yourself this, here's the change, how much do you have? Ask the question, was buying that worth it to have only this left over? And ask those bigger questions so that they can start to tie all of that in from a decision-making process. Okay. Understanding credit. Buy now and pay later. It's so convenient. It's super easy to overspend. And you must always repay what is borrowed. And if you don't, then you just end up paying on it forever and ever and ever. I think that this is huge. So many colleges go after college students to get their first credit card. And I remember being on campus and saying, hey, would you like to take out this credit card? Like, sure. Teach them about what the interest rates are. Are you going to end up with an interest rate that is just astronomical versus other cards that you might have a lower limit on it, but the interest rate is lower as well. So is that going to be in your benefit than having something that allows you $10,000 spending and the credit and the interest limit is, at 23%. So pay attention to all of those kinds of things. Eric, do you have anything that you want to add to this particular one?
No, I guess they say there is value in establishing credit prior to, wanting to borrow money to buy a house. And there is value to that. But credit cards are very dangerous in terms of allowing us to overextend ourselves and buy more than we can. So I guess the key there is even if you're using a credit card, tie that in with your budget and make sure that you have that money available and that you're spending what you can pay off at the end of the month and that it fits within your budget.
Exactly. So just some things to think about in terms of credit responsibilities. Don't run up more debt than you can comfortably repay.
Mm-hmm.
You need to read and understand the credit contract. You need to pay your debts promptly. That means at the end of whatever the monthly cycle is. Try not to have any carryover from month to month. Notify the credit company immediately if you cannot make payments. Notify your creditor immediately if your credit card is lost or stolen. And never, this is a big one, never give your credit card number over the phone unless you have initiated the call or you are certain of the caller's identity. So there's a lot of identity theft and a lot of scams going on right now. I think that is also something that we need to educate our children about, is what does that look like, as well as our elderly. Because there's scammers that are going after both age groups, right? Those that don't have enough knowledge and those that are too trusting. So we really want to make sure that we're doing right by all of our folks in our community. But from this perspective, it's right. Build it into your budget. So know exactly how much you can spend on a monthly basis because you're going to be paying it off at the end of every month. And then savings. a couple questions. Will I ever be able to buy a new car? How many years will it take me to double my savings? Start small, have those 3 jars, right? Save, spend, donate. Small amounts of money can quickly grow into larger sums, but the sooner a person gets started saving and investing, the better. And this is just really about starting small and getting them to understand how those dollars can add up, but do it in such a way that it's a consistent practice and it's not something that's just once a year. So setting the stage and the expectation that some portion of what you earn goes into savings regularly. And then some strategies for savings. Develop some financial goals for the short term, 1 to 4 weeks, or medium range, 2 to 12 months, or over a long range over a year. Set those goals so that you know exactly what it is that you're looking for. How much do I want to save in 4 weeks? Why do I want to save that money in 4 weeks? Is it because I want to, or in 12 months, because I want to buy a PlayStation, or is it because I'm looking to pay my way to for a vacation after my first year of college? So really clearly articulating what it is that you're saving for provides you the motivation in order to do that savings. Take a set amount from each paycheck and place it into the savings. This can be done automatically if you have direct deposit. And then take all unexpected monies and place it into savings. It's a smart way to go about it. And then these are just the resources. So at this point, I'm happy to open it up to any additional questions for folks. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll say one thing is that these tips that you're giving are not just for children. They're not just for neurodiverse children. They're good for adults, for households, for organizations. So what you're sharing with us are things that people use universally to manage, whether it's a company, a nonprofit, a government. So very, very good advice.
Okay.
Eric, I believe I've sent you a list of questions that we've gathered here, so we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. What have you found is a good starter job for a student who is neurodiverse? I'm worried that my child won't have the support they need in a regular job for a teen or young adult.
It depends on what their interests are and their skill sets are. It depends on whether they're willing to disclose that they are neurodiverse, because if they do disclose that, then it's much easier to ask for accommodations. I don't know if there is a universally good starter job. More often than not, it's about what will hold their interest and about the environment in which they're doing that job. Is it nurturing? Is it welcoming? Is it supportive? Will they give the individual the proper training and the proper support? I tend to think of questions like, does my neurodiverse child have any sensitivities? Do they have auditory sensitivities? Any kind of sensitivity to smell, things like that, because you want to take those into consideration in terms of the environment. Do they have light sensitivity? If that's the case, look, working in a grocery store, not a good starter job. There's a lot of smells from the fish and the meat markets. The lights are typically neon. There's a massive amount of noise and motion and movement. So really taking into consideration all of those things, I think, are going to be good. But more importantly, find an employer who is welcoming. And there are a fair number of employers out there that have a mission to employ as many people who are neurodiverse as possible.
Yeah, those are some good thoughts. How can you foster a child's independence? For example, if they don't want to move out and they are a young adult.
That's a really, really good question.
Yeah, I think I dropped a bomb on you with that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it all comes back to motivation and why. What about the current situation is prompting them to not want to move? So that, I think, is a very, very long conversation to have. I'm happy to have it. Maybe not on this particular webinar, but I'm happy to certainly speak to whomever is asking that question. But a lot of it has to do with how we're setting expectations in terms of responsibilities. What are they responsible for doing on a weekly basis? Are they getting reinforced for that? Are they getting that pat on the back? Are they feeling the pride that comes along with doing something independently or succeeding in something that they've not done before? Or does somebody step in and help them along the way? Because a lot of children, regardless of their whether they're neurodiverse or not, have learned to just wait, that if they wait long enough, somebody's going to step in and do it for them. And if that's the case, why would you move out? That's a lot of effort. A lot of effort. Everything is your responsibility now, not just that one thing, everything is. And so really looking at what's setting the stage for them to not want to move is a good place to start. And then figuring out, what am I doing to enable that, or what am I doing to change it up a little bit? I think is a good place to start.
Yeah, that's a good thought. So when you're working with children on managing their money, how do you follow up on the child? Like, how often and how might you just check to see how they're doing?
Well, regardless of their age, keeping everything as concrete as possible is going to be really important. So asking them to save all of their receipts. If you're going on a cash basis, you might have an envelope full of cash, an envelope full of receipts, and then you meet on a weekly basis and you go through and say, oh, you started with $40. I see that you only have $5 left. Look, you only have 2 receipts and they don't line up for all of the rest of the money that's been spent. Where is that? What did you do with it? Or did you lose the receipt? So going back and talking about it and following up on a weekly basis is going to be essential for them to start to tie how their behavior interacts directly with the earning and the spending of money. That's how we do it.
Good. And
I think we have time for just this one last question
one last
here.
question. Okay. Well, I think one of the things you've kind of emphasized is the interests of the child. So when you're teaching them about money, you've also said it's, you want to make learning about money fun. So do you have some ideas on how to make it enjoyable? I mean, I can imagine that last question, of sitting down with the receipts. It's hard to make that a fun, perhaps, conversation. But if you have any just
well, you can make that fun. You can make that fun because if they hit it doesn't matter as long as if their receipts match whatever it is they spent and they can account for that, you might be able to give them more money. Mm-hmm. If you come back and you show me that you have accounted for everything that you've spent and I see that in receipts, I'm going to give you an extra $5. That's pretty fun. Mm-hmm. Fun could be anything from teaching them to count and putting those pennies or that cash into some place that's their very own. It really is, it's sort of dependent on what their interests are. If they really like pizza, maybe the whole process of buying every single ingredient, right? And they're a part of the process of buying all of those ingredients, and then they get to assemble it and then they get to eat it. It's a self-fulfilling kind of reinforcement process here. We're like, oh my God, I had no idea it costs as much money to make pizza, but I'm going to eat it all. So whatever it is that you can think how to tie your child's interest into learning about money is really viable. There's no right or wrong way to do this as long as you're modeling for them what the expectations are and being overt. I mean, even if you're just, it's sort of self-talk, like, oh, wow, I have another 5 days until payday and we really need this. So if we need this, we're going to forego this, so that they understand that there's a give and take and that there's a balance involved. But I don't know, when I say fun, I'm not saying, making it sound like it's carnival fun, but because maybe taking them to a carnival and there you go. And they pay for every single ticket. So it's really about how creative you can be in
Mhm.
teaching it.
Sure. No, that's good. That's very helpful.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. What
You're welcome.
interesting thoughts. And hopefully our participants have gleaned something that will work in their family, maybe some new ideas. And so we'd love to know if our participants have any feedback. Go ahead and leave that in the chat. On behalf of Advice Chaser, I want to thank you for being here today and thank the organizations that have made this webinar possible. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we will see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.